Hello, Edwina Murphy-Droomer here, and I want to warmly welcome you to this interview in the series where I am speaking to phenomenal feminine entrepreneurs in order to gain their life-changing insights on taking control of your prosperity, your freedom, and your beautiful future. Today, oh my goodness, today I am speaking to one of my dearest friends, Meredith Allan, and I am so excited to be doing this interview like a little girl, all giddy. Meredith, welcome, darling, and thank you so much for being with us.
It's always a joy to get to spend extra time with you, Edwina. Thank you so much.
I just can't wait to share your story because it's a story that I've heard a few times, but sharing it with a wider audience is such an honor, darling. So let's go back. Obviously, your career started in television, but I would love for you to share some of that story, why you came to be doing that, and how you've now moved into marketing and supporting people to become more seen.
Well, thank you so much. I think my mother might tell you, Edwina, that I was born mic'd up and ready to go, a journalist from the start, always very inquisitive and curious.
Yeah.
That's really where it all began for me. And so it was a natural fit to fall into television. And in my high school, it was very unique. It was the size of an airport. And right before I got there, they started installing televisions in every single room.
Yeah.
And it turned out that there was an opportunity that you could audition to be a morning anchor. And as luck would have it, I got the gig. And one day I looked into the television and I thought, oh, people get paid to do this. That was it. I mean, I was so clear I was going to retire Barbara Walters or Oprah, whichever came first. And I was really on that mission and trajectory for quite some time. And I found it really, really exhilarating at times and very trying at others, so for a multitude of reasons. But, first of all, we all know that not everybody makes it in TV. And so it was highly competitive, even from the start. In my very first station, like at Beckley, West Virginia, small cities, I was told to get out of the big city I lived in Philadelphia and just get my feet wet. So I took that advice and I was out there. If you've ever been to West Virginia, it's quite remote. The center of the universe is Walmart. Nothing against Walmart, but it's a very odd place to be for action. And that's where we would go for big stories or sound bites. And, I really felt after several years that I never fell out of love with telling the stories, but I got a little disheartened over the years as things progressed. And I did get to go to bigger cities and I got bigger gigs and better salaries. But in the end, you really talk a lot about fires, murders, and murders and fires with a side of kidnapping. And it can really wear on you.
Yeah.
It's sad, in fact. And it just became very evident that also as I progressed higher and higher in the ranks, what the weird thing was, you do less and less. And what I mean by that is anchor literally sits and reads the teleprompter. And while it looks glamorous to many people, it's almost mind numbing. I would literally, Edwina, rewrite the words because I was so bored of my lovely writers and producers, much to their chagrin, by the way.
Yeah.
And, I just had to keep myself busy. So there came a point where I felt, and I sacrificed a lot as well, because when you work in television, there's this idea that you're always focused on the next step. So meaning you take this job so you can get that job. And then when you have that job, you're focused on the following job. And it's really a hamster wheel, if you will. And not a good one that I recommend to many people for the long haul in that manner. And so I remember being up in the middle of the night, Edwina, and surfing the net, getting ready for, I think I had to be in at 3 a.m. because I worked as a morning anchor and producer for many years. And thinking, something's got to give. I want something with meaning. And so I literally Googled like things with meaning, jobs with meaning. I wound up on a website for the United Way, which here in the States is just really committed to banding together volunteers for a multitude of gorgeous causes and nonprofits. And I sent an email and it was just very simple. I'm working in television and I have for years, but I'd love to do something more with meaning. I don't think I said anything more than that. And as luck would have it, the president and chief executive officer of the entire state that I was in got the email and replied. And he said, "I think that's fantastic. Would you like to do lunch?" I thought, "Are you kidding me?" I had a celebrity moment. I thought that was so cool. Somebody who had such heart and such a big job made the generous time to meet with me. And after we talked a bit, he said, with all the press releases you receive and all the interviews that you do, I think you'd be magic at teaching, say, my PR and marketing staff how to do their message, how to show up on camera and things like that. And up until that time, publicity and things of that nature weren't really on my radar.
Yeah.
But he gave me a wonderful gig and an opportunity. And as luck would have it, it went really well. And we were able to raise lovely money as part of a video campaign we produced. And I had to be legit and really found a company, never planned to, actually never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was raised that, bless my dad and may he rest in peace, that a good working woman gets a regular paycheck and reports with benefits, and that's safe and secure.
Yeah.
So this was quite outlandish for a leap that nobody really saw coming. Certainly not my parents, and definitely not I.
Yeah.
But no regrets. Ever since then, it's just sort of been a wonderful, we could call it hurricane, snowball, growing and growing with ebbs and flows, much like any storm.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I don't think I realized, I don't know if I'd heard that story about how you actually stepped into the marketing. Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, you keep saying as luck would have it. I don't think there's much luck involved, Meredith. I just think that you're so magnetic and fabulous that people just want to grab hold of you.
Well, that's very kind of you. And you're right. I think we undersell the possibility that things are happening for us and not to us. So looking back, perhaps it was the perfect series of shocking events. I've been fired quite a bit, by the way. I didn't even mention that, and I love to keep it real. In the news world, Edwina, it's not only competitive, as I said, and cutthroat, but it's quite superficial. So if I was hired, and look at me, that not much has changed, for my blue eyes and dark hair, and the news director came in and he liked blondes, I mean, that was just it. It was simple as that. We were all out of work, and it could be that easy. So I've been through it all. And I'm very grateful to now really charter my own course and encourage people all over the world that their messages are important and powerful. And their stories do get to be heard, and it doesn't need to be on the nightly news.
One of the things that you talk about in our book that I love, and I love about you, is the authenticity and the message around authenticity. And when you're in TV, it was all smiles and everything's fabulous. Even if you're talking about somebody's being murdered, you still got to, have this mask on, and how you've been able to let go of that with the work that you do now. So let's dive in there a bit. I mean, I think vulnerability and authenticity sort of tie in together, but tell me how that's shifted the way that you show up now on camera and in your work.
Thank you, because I do believe that shift is everything. If everybody today watching this has one takeaway, and they could just give themselves permission to get messy and lift the veil, the mask, the guard, let that guard down. For me, I didn't even see it coming, nor was I even really aware of how trained I was to just, lights are on, bring it up, energy up, 3, 2, 1. And, I could have been crying hysterically three minutes before, but the lights are on. And so that training was so embedded in me that when I lost my dad, just about 3 years ago now, my whole world just sort of went into off kilter, if you will. And the only thing I knew to do was get up and go to work. So like a lunatic, I think I lost my dad on a Friday. The following Tuesday, I believe it was, I was back at work. And I powered through. And what I figured and what I learned as I was just in a gorgeous gift, new to this community and really taking in all the learnings, was that in my naivete, I thought, because I had a broadcasting background, doing something, called summits, similar to what this is, that we're putting together, that formula of creating these shows would be so easy. And I was just so wrong.
Yeah.
It was just so naive of me and egotistical. And, I think that when we get overly confident, it's not that I don't believe confidence isn't super important, but I
Yeah.
believe being humble
Mm.
enough to know, like, that looks easy, but let me just learn more.
Yeah.
Being
Yeah.
wise enough to know what's in it. And, I really think when I lost my dad, I got feedback that I was showing up cold, arrogant, things that I never felt that I was. And I knew deep down inside I was not,
Yeah.
but I was probably showing up that way. I was furious at the world for losing my favorite person. And incidentally, I lost him very quickly. Some people have somebody diagnosed with an illness and they have a few years, and there's a big journey. With my dad, it was like 91 days from diagnosis to death. And I thought I was fine. I actually was worried because I wasn't crying, and I was like calling people for advice, like, what is normal? And probably the best advice I received was, there is no normal.
Yeah.
And that plays right into our vulnerability and our intimacy. If we're really open, there's nothing defining how we have to be.
Yeah.
It is what it is. We are who we are. And when we show up with that messiness and being raw and the ability to literally open up, even if it doesn't feel good, but somebody needs to hear it, with that generosity, I think the trajectory of your career, your relationships, and your life changes all for the good and the better.
Yeah. Yeah. We were on a parallel journey doing similar things, but we hadn't really connected. We'll share the story of how we really connected shortly. But, that was 2018 was the year that I lost my sister. And that was, instant. I'd seen her 4 days before for my birthday. And then 4 days later, I found her dead. So there was no warning. But I was halfway through putting together my first show and just kept going. I didn't stop anything. And I think that's something that's tied us together, is this way that we've gone through grief, but also just this power on mentality, not necessarily something that served us, but something that we've been able to support each other on. And I share that because I think it's really interesting for people to see, and to hear about what's going on behind the scenes. So, there's lots and lots of talk of, on Instagram or on social media and these shows, everything's very polished and lovely on the outside. And it looks like these fabulous lives are happening, which in many cases they absolutely are. We both have incredibly blessed lives. But there's also stuff going on behind the scenes, which is a big part of what this show is about in Phenomenal Feminine Entrepreneurs. But it is sharing these stories behind the scenes that other people get to see themselves in our journeys, and how they can keep going through what they're trying to build and create what they're trying to build when they've got kids, when they've got life happening in the background as well. So maybe if we share how you came to be, the introduction to our book. I share a bit of my story, how I ended up on stage in America in front of about 1,000 people, and we were on the same stage. And that's when we really started to connect from that point. So I'd love you to share your journey in being invited to speak at the Zone event.
Well, thank you. That was quite a moment, and we share one thing in common, I believe, Edwina. And not only despite adversity, it is a passion and a drive not just to move forward, but to thrive, to serve, to do something bigger. And little did I know that at the same time I was dreaming, I wound up showing up a year prior to meeting you on that stage to the same event that we were reunited on. And I looked up and I saw what they called a success panel. And I was enthralled at that point. Up until then, I just came to the event thinking I might find a good coach. I'm a coach and have been for many years. And I always thought, to be in congruency, we get to have a coach, right? It's not that the work never ends if we're always leveling up. And little did I know there was a program to learn how to build an audience, and something I hadn't thought about, to be honest. Now you might think that's weird, Meredith. You had an audience, working on NBC and all these television networks. But I never woke up and said, I think I'll build my audience today, and even thought about what that would look like, that not only do our fans fall in love with us, but they look to us for support, the responsibility of guidance. And what I learned is many people have great success building communities and really sharing their gifts in a big way. And so when I saw that, for instance, the story that really stuck with me is there was a young lady who was living in her trailer and invested in the same program that I was thinking about. Yeah. And she made, I believe it was $1 million her first year, something so insane that my eyes almost popped out. And I thought, I'm a TV personality. I could host a show. That was the formula, and build an audience. Like, so naive as I precluded. And never in my wildest dreams thinking my father would be diagnosed and die during exactly the same time it sounds like you were dealing with the loss of your sister. And then really having to dig in deep. And thank God, I always give credit to my coach at that time in that program. And she said, I think a lot of people would really, really understand if you stopped right now, if you paused, if you threw in the towel for the moment. And, the realness of her saying that. And then she said, but, and I believe is the word, what would it look like to make your father insanely proud and built exactly what you signed up for in this program? And as miracles do happen when you hold the vision, and for me, it was like, I get to make it to be a success example on that stage, and in an extraordinary series of good fortune and events, and through a lot of hardship. I would say, when people sit up there and they pretend it's all bed and roses, as we were just touching on earlier, it makes me mad. It makes me cringe now when I can tell somebody's putting on the front, right? And I'd much rather you say, this was hellacious and I'm so glad I went through it, and I'll tell you all about it if you want to know, and thank goodness I'm here now to tell you about it, right? Because that's relatable. We all have stuff, as you said. And so for me, I guess the big thing with my stuff was losing my best friend, my dad. And then, Edwina in the late hour says, do you think, I think she got how big the moment was. I was still in shock that we were invited. I mean, not in shock that we were invited because we both saw it was possible, but it was just so surreal when you step into that vision, right?
It was. Yeah, it absolutely was. It's like, it's almost you're standing on the outside of it. It was like, is this really me? Is it?
And as luck would have it, Edwina said, maybe we should get our hair and makeup done and just enjoy
that's right.
it.
Yeah.
And I, the TV person who used to really believe in how important that was, had completely forgotten about it. And I lost my mind, and I was so excited to just have that experience with you.
Mind you, it wasn't very glamorous.
No, it wasn't glamorous at all. In fact, we were like in dark corners behind a curtain.
Sitting on the edge of a bathtub.
It was crazy and wonderful all at once, and fun, and I don't know what it was about the moment, but I just fell in love with you instantly, knowing your story and just what we've both been through. And people like you, Edwina, are people that we hold close and we never want to let go. And showing up there on that stage and opening up about it has actually changed the trajectory of my life. I still have clients to this day who saw me there, heard the story, and were moved to really connect and work together. And I think that that's what works for you as well. You deeply connect with your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that segues beautifully into talking about leadership. I loved in the book, and there's so many, moments in our book where people are so radically honest, and they're conversations that I don't think are happening elsewhere, which I love. And you said in there, I asked, what does feminine leadership look like to you or mean to you? And you said you don't think in terms of feminine and masculine, which I think is really interesting. So we definitely both talk about leadership a lot and the role that it plays in our lives. So let's go there. What is leadership, feminine leadership, look like to you, and the role that it plays in the business that you're building?
Well, I think the word grace comes up for me,
Mm,
living a life in grace.
yeah.
And what do I mean by that? I mean, really showing up in such a way with, when I hear people talk about grace, like with love, compassion. Um, but the weird thing about it for me, and why I don't often think of feminine leadership or
Mm,
define that frequently for myself, is not because I don't believe in it or anything of that nature. It's just my father just embedded that he had this thing where if you want to be president of the world, you could be president of the
yeah.
world. If you want to be,
Yeah.
and so I never, until much later in life, Edwina, this is actually a moment I didn't share in the book, but I think it's really interesting. I was at a holiday party and I was the vice president and news director, I believe, at the corporation. I had been promoted
Yeah.
twice. Anyway, and I looked around, and the only other woman at the event was the executive assistant. And it was that, just that moment where, in my naivete, I hadn't been thinking about being a woman and what that mattered, and the jobs and roles, that it hit me like, this is a small table if it's just the two of
Mm,
us, you know? And I wasn't really cognizant till later about the gifts of being a woman in leadership. I think we are often a little more in tune
yeah.
with emotionally, what's really going on. And feminine leadership has many legs. And I I believe that there is such a beautiful energy that women bring to the room.
Yeah.
I just never grew up focusing on it or being aware of it. It was so ingrained by my dad that, I get to be the president of everything if I want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
He literally would say things, like, go for it.
Yeah.
And I believed in a naive manner that it was
Yeah.
all possible. And I failed a lot. I ran for,
Yeah,
yeah, go
I
ahead.
just I just think that, it's such a gift. And I always I know I hear myself saying not right or wrong in throughout my conversations a lot, but just sharing different experiences. I was raised by a much older father. So he was 54 when I was born. He would be 103 now if he was still alive. He was born the same year as Nelson Mandela. But he raised me to be a princess. He wrapped me in cotton wool and he patted me on the head and he said one day, he didn't say it verbally, but the message was one day else will look after you. Like you'll find a man to marry that'll marry you. We don't expect too much. You just look pretty and show up. And that's, he did that from absolute love because that was the generation that he grew up with. So my messaging was, don't you worry your pretty little head about it too much. You don't have to do anything other than have lovely manners and show up and look pretty. And it didn't serve me. It didn't serve me. When I left home, I couldn't even turn on a washing machine, let alone cook or do anything else. Hopeless. Hopeless. So I think the messaging that you received has empowered you to an amazing and just been such a gift in creating what you've created. I think it's just fabulous. I just want to highlight that.
Well, I want to thank you for seeing
Mm,
that. And I will say there's a downside. And the
yeah.
downside for the way I was raised, because I think that this is another good moment where I could just say thank you and great. But the truth
Oh,
is, I got in my own way, and I am 45 and single. And the reason I'm 45 and single is part of my dad's message was he wanted to raise me so you didn't need anybody.
yeah.
Meaning, um, he had grown up in poverty and watched his mother struggle because his father wasn't there for them. He was an alcoholic. And
Yeah.
I think he was almost on the flip side of that. And so I literally was so career driven and focused for many years. I think I didn't make the space, if I'm being open and true, for the things that now, I find so joyous and valuable. Family time is everything. And I've always loved my family, but it wasn't embedded in me to create a family. So I acknowledge you through all the
Mm,
years. I mean, you have these lovely children and a beautiful family.
yeah.
And I don't at this moment in time. I have a beautiful dog
Yeah.
and I have a wonderful boyfriend and he's got a gorgeous son, and who knows what's around the corner. But
Yeah.
um there's a yin and a yang to
Yeah.
everything, Edwina. So yes, I am very fortunate to have had the courage and confidence to play with the boys at a younger age.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I do value the feminine energy, the grace that we bring, and the strength and courage that we can show up with
Mm.
all of those things.
Yeah. I realize I pulled the conversation off track a little bit. We were talking about feminine leadership. And I think that, when I think of you as a leader, because you are, and I know how greatly people love you and love listening to you when you speak, especially on stages and so on, because you're just so magnetic. Your stories are so fabulous. But I think that, where I see the femininity coming into it is the willingness to share the mess. And I don't think that that's something that we saw until fairly recently, where leaders would stand on stage and say, I hit rock bottom. And I think that that's come mostly through more feminine conversations.
I
Mm.
would acknowledge that, and I would say, yeah, it's actually much more common still to this day to have a lady show up that way than a gentleman. And I'm not judging that that makes a man, like you said, there's no right or wrong, good or bad.
Mm.
But I am way more attracted to humans
Yeah.
who are willing to go there, to get
Yeah.
messy and show the good, bad, and ugly and all of it, because
Mm.
it really makes us recognize the reflection we see in ourselves, that
Mm.
nobody's ever, if we're being really truthful, perfect. That's
Yeah.
just a myth.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first questions that I ask in the book is, what is the why behind what you do and what you're creating in the world right now? And I just want to touch on that with you, because I think it's so important for people to understand that, we can get excited about creating the money. Obviously, the prosperity, creating the wealth is a big piece of why we do what we do, unapologetically, but there's got to be a deeper why behind it. There's got to be a reason that drives you beyond money, because money's just not going to cut it. And there's people in this show that have turned over, Forbes Riley's turned over 2.5 billion in sales. So it's not the money that's pulling her forward to do what she's doing. There's a deeper why. So what is your why, Meredith? What is, has it evolved? And, what is pulling you forward at the moment?
I think there's some congruency in the sense that I started out wanting to share gorgeous stories. And I believe at the end of the day, I'm very capable and love helping people with that.
Yeah.
And I love telling my own stories. And the greater good is I love, at the end of the day, helping people make their dreams come true.
Yeah.
And the way we get there is never on the same path, but often there are some similarities for what gets in the way. It might be a limiting belief somebody has. It might be a story of money, time. These things come up over and over, but inevitably we get in our own way. And it is such an honor to serve people and have those difficult conversations of not what people want to hear, but what they get and need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And so my why is I love showing up for the world and helping people get out of their own way, get clear on their sharing the magic in their story. There's magic and grace in your story, Edwina, and every person watching has magic and grace in their stories.
Yeah.
And whether they choose to step up and share them powerfully in a multitude of places, or even just in a conversation that somebody gets to hear because they need to hear it,
Yeah.
is so important. And so
Yeah.
at the end of the day, ultimately, that's my why.
Love it. Love it. So let's talk about vision. Obviously, one of my favorite conversations, favorite topics. When you're creating something new, when you're deciding on how a new project or something that you're doing, how do you bring that to life? Where do you start?
I start with the things that bring me joy. I have learned through the years that helping others brings me joy, which is why naturally I love to mentor. I love to work in the journalism sphere and share stories. And, I think what gets in the way often is we think we know what's right. I think recalibrating, if you're taking notes, write down recalibrating is so important from time to time. And I get sidetracked, here and there, but I believe that in your vision, if you could really hone in on your gifts and the things that bring you joy, and see them, write them down, speak them. I mean, I can give you example after example through the years of just literally showing up and telling people, I want to retire Barbara Walters. Great. I wound up working on 2020, Barbara Walters special, Barbara Walters The View. I got flown to stay at the Great Omni Hotel in Chicago for Oprah's show to interview there. I mean, because I literally saw it. People said like they were scared of me in college. I had a picture of Oprah like everywhere in my room, everywhere you look.
Love it.
Saw that vision and I held it. And I think that that's what it takes, not just to have the dream, but to see and trust that it's possible, and being willing to go there to do whatever it takes, and not being attached to what it is. I regret. I was attached to going to college and then working in a certain level station, and then having the anchor job, and it had to be in a certain order. Gosh, looking back, I wish I had just lightened up and said, I see the vision and I am not attached in how I'm getting there.
Yeah. So I love the story that you tell about hearing, I think you were still in high school when you heard somebody talking about writing goals and the power of writing goals.
Yes, it was actually a life-changing moment. The speaker said that less than 1% of the world sets goals. And that's just like, what? And then he said, so if you set goals, you are going to be 99% ahead of the rest of the world. And that like shook me as a kid. And it just became something that was embedded in me. Like, I get to be a goal crusher. And it really propelled me through so many fabulous, beautiful, wonderful dreams coming true. And to this day, I have them written down. I have them on the wall behind me on sticky notes. I have them in notebooks. I have cards. I mean, and I like to share whenever possible when I speak to people, a little bit about not only my vision, but I love sharing other people's wins and visions and successes for running down their dreams. Very rewarding.
Yeah. I love your insights. You talk to people all the time. You've met a lot of different people on different paths. And I would love to hear your thoughts on, is everybody cut out to be an entrepreneur? What do you think it takes to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I definitely do not think everybody is cut out to be an entrepreneur. And anybody who says it's the greatest gig ever, and that's all they say, is just full of it. Period, right, Edwina? Yeah. I mean, it's just not that simple. I think it takes a very special kind of person. You must thrive chartering your own course and really have an ability to navigate through uncharted territory, unforeseen challenges. And however, the flip side of that is you get to design your life. And I don't know at this juncture I could have it any other way. And there are definitely moments, Edwina, I had one this week, where I get these alerts. I think my mom at some point set it up in my email for jobs here in Los Angeles for skills that match me, and she thinks she's funny. And like these salaries, Edwina, are like several $100,000 for director of communication. Every once in a while, I'm like, oh, what it might be like to just show up somewhere. And I do miss seeing people. I mean, like, I'm not complaining. I'll be happy to share, like where I live, I'm right here. If you can see the water, this has been my dream for many, many years. Yeah. And at the same time, it's not easy. It was hard getting here. I mean, my gosh, I could go on, and we don't have enough time in your show for, the trials and tribulations. So, but what it takes is determination, flexibility, giving yourself and others grace, showing up no matter whatever it takes often, and being willing to be okay with totally getting it all wrong. Starting from scratch, right?
Yeah. I've got to add to that tribe and community and like-minded friends, because that's been the pivotal thing that made the difference for me.
Yes, and having a coach or a mentor like yourself has absolutely. I could not have made it without a tribe of trusted friends and colleagues and mentors through the years. There's no way. I mean, my parents, as loving as they were, and there were so many things that I cherished about my dad's philosophies, didn't live this way, and therefore didn't even have a frame of reference to tell me about profit and loss, and just certain things that as a business owner we really get to master.
Yeah. I talk about tuning into the voices of people that pull you forward, and I've got my people that I need to listen to, talk to regularly, like daily sometimes, often, in order to keep me on track. Because when we're creating something big in the world with this book and this show, there's times when it's like, gosh, I don't know. I don't know if I want to keep doing this. It's a lot of work. And so who are some of those voices for you?
Oh, goodness. Les Brown and Lisa Nichols are probably two of my favorite public speakers of all time. I
Yeah.
like Pastor T.D. Jakes. I'm the Jewish girl who loves listening to a good pastor. There are some magical things said from the pulpit with passion, and they talk about grace, one of my favorite subjects, and of course love, so
Mm.
frequently. And there is um, so much wisdom for me that I draw from a spiritual practice called Kabbalah, and that is just ultimately a decision to show up and choose to be the light.
Mm.
Even in dark moments, difficult challenges, just it's always a choice how we either react or we don't.
Yeah.
We can choose not to play into, for instance, somebody who's frustrated or a bad situation.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to break your day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I love in the book, you actually use the example of somebody cuts you off in traffic. And that's something that I've been saying to my clients for a long time. It's that idea that, somebody cuts you off in traffic, you can either swear and stick your finger up and make it a massive thing that they've been a total, I want to say pig, that means, but, somebody, that just
There are a lot of
out.
words we could
Oh,
use for
yeah.
that, Edwina.
Yeah. But the other choice is to approach it from, oh my goodness, I hope they're okay. What's happened in their life? Did they just get a phone call that somebody's in hospital that they've got to get to? There's always a way that we can shift our, that frame of reference to have a different experience. And I think that's hugely powerful, understanding that.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and we want to make powerful decisions and
Mm.
recognize that we have the choice to, I like to say, either be proactive or reactive.
Yeah.
And being proactive in life is being so clear in our vision. So we're speaking
Mm.
to the visionary here, so clear in our vision that gunfire could be going off, but
Mm.
you know that in your heart, you're going to be the good in the situation. You're going to
Yeah.
remain calm because somebody needs you, a loved one needs you at home, and all those things. And it's a challenge. It's
Yeah.
actually a whole shift in your life if you can. I mean, I'll say one more thing because I think you've shared with me that you found it a little shocking. This thing I say quite often is that most people live their lives in mediocrity, and I don't say that with
Yeah.
judgment.
Yeah.
I just think that it is very frequent that we're raised by the parents that we have. We may live in perhaps the same town we've grown up in, and there's a gorgeous history and roots to that. And yet there's something more we long for, and we don't have the courage perhaps to be in excellence, to go the extra mile.
Mm.
And I know that very well because that was me. Up
Yeah.
until a couple of years ago, I
Yeah.
really became present to that. And it was through leadership training and having a coach and somebody calling me forward and saying, there's more in there.
Yeah.
We've got more work to do. There's more good for you to do. There are more people for you to serve, and really calling you forward to fully embody that dream and vision.
Yeah, it was that same leadership training that, that I learned about. Really, it dawned on me the idea that I saw myself as a victim of things. My husband walked away. I had 4 children under 8, and that's a, reason why I can't, my mum this, so I can't that, and I see myself as this, so I can't that. And I was just putting myself squarely in a victim box. And so the idea of responsibility, we get to take responsibility for this life that we're living, was just, oh my, it was like this massive weight just lifted. I got to decide that I get to be the woman I choose to be. I get to dress however I want, regardless of what anyone else says, and show up and create a business that I want, regardless of what anyone else might think about it. And quite frankly, my mum and sister, they really have almost no idea what I do, and they don't even know how to ask questions because it's so outside their sphere of normal or what they know
Just
or
like me.
understand. It's bizarre.
You're being nice. My sister judges me. You're
Yeah.
working with those cult people and those lost people. I mean, all this crazy story and judgment because they really don't know what we do.
No.
And I say that's unfortunate, but we're not going to push it
Yeah.
on somebody who's not receptive or quite understanding of the world that we're in and
Yeah.
and the choices we've made.
Yeah. Yeah. It's anyway, it's interesting to take a different path, and it is a different path because so many of us have grown up with that. You go to school and then you go to university or higher learning. For me, that was naturopathy and functional nutrition. It's like, why on earth aren't you using that? What is this other thing that you do? And I know that it's, when you've only got those voices, it's very hard to stretch yourself into a different way of doing things and a different way of being. So that's where, tribe and different, friends that are on a similar path just are invaluable, make or break.
Yes.
Thank goodness I've got you.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was holding it in, but that's exactly how I feel, Edwina. We're so lucky to have each other. Thank you.
Yes. Meredith, I know that you have a beautiful gift for our audience. Did you want to take a minute just to let them know what that is?
Absolutely. So through the years of working in marketing and messaging for so long, I've just found that there are a multitude of ways that we can raise our visibility. So I've put together a gift, and it's really a list that you can just go down and see what resonates with you. It's called 18 Ways to Raise Your Visibility. And I believe we all deserve to do that, to raise our visibility so that whether you're just starting out or you're looking to get to the next level with your company or just make a change, whether you're moving from corporate to something new. Maybe you're coming out of parenting and looking to get into work, period. You get to be more visible, and people get to understand that there are a multitude of ways to be there, and not everything works for everybody. Those who will be gorgeous on TV may not be the same who love being on radio, and that's fine. But there are a multitude of ways to get yourself out there, and so I've comprised my favorite list of 18 ways to do that.
Making me think of a friend, Melissa, who just put together a series called Brave Feminine Leadership. It happened a bit earlier this year, but she's strictly in the corporate space, and what she's hearing is women that are still afraid to speak up around, in meetings and stuff, and to be seen. So I imagine your resource would be an amazing help to them as well. One final question. What does a rich and prosperous life look like to Meredith Allan?
First and foremost, it's filled with family. And, for years, I thought that was a back burner thing and someday I'd get to it, but it really has become a huge part of my heart. And I've really made a lot of space in my life for that. So first and foremost, I believe it's about family. And for my career and keeping in balance, I believe that understanding that we're here with gifts, and I really do believe it's just selfish when we know what we have and we hold back and we don't serve the masses, if you will. And so for me, living a rich life is serving as many people as possible, as long as possible, so long as we both shall live, I'll say, Edwina. Because you're in that game too. And I think that for me is rich, and having the ability, looking back at my younger self, I wish I didn't scream and shout, lighten up! Take some time to smell the roses and laugh and enjoy your friends and stop thinking about 20 steps from now and that, that material thing, because we can't take it with us. That's where I'm at.
I love it, and I love you. Thank you so much for being part of this show, Allan.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you. And for all those phenomenal, wonderful women out there, thank you for watching.